What is up, everyone? Welcome to round 5, the semifinals of the Portland Monthly Premodern Paper Magic Afternoons April 2024 tournament. We've got a couple of rad decks, so without further ado, let's dive into the deck list. First up, we have Will, and what is, I believe, a first for the channel. I don't think we've ever had coverage of a blue-white Landstill control deck. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is a first. For those of you not familiar with the deck, it's pretty much just blue-white control with lots of counter spells, lots of removal, and the card Standstill, which is a 2-mana enchantment that whenever a player casts a spell, sacrifice Standstill. If you do, each of that player's opponents draws 3 cards. So blue-white control is all about gaining card advantage and waiting until your opponent is out of resources before slamming down the win. In this case, the winning cards are going to be 3 Decree of Justices, 2 Fairy Conclaves, and 4 Factories. This is by no means a fast deck, but it is an effective deck, so I will be curious to see who he's playing against. Returning to the camera is Chris on Enchantress. For those of you that have not seen that video, Enchantress is a value engine deck that takes advantage of the 8 Enchantress abilities in Argothian Enchantress and Enchantress Presence to generate tons of mana, draw tons of cards, using Sarah's Sanctum to pay for all of those crazy enchantments and eventually just get to a point where your opponent has to concede. The value engine is strong with this one, with Elephant Grass presenting a real problem for aggro decks and Miri's Guile helping you get that card selection you desperately need to draw into, you guessed it, more enchantments. This is going to be a pretty slow matchup and it's going to be a game of inches, so I'm curious to see how, well, first off, how long it's going to go, but second off, who is going to take it down. So let's just get into the games. And here we go. Will is on the left, Chris is going to be on the right. A little fist bump to get things started. So as I mentioned in the deck tech, this is definitely going to be a game of inches. Whoever can get a foothold first is probably going to spiral into a winning position, or snowball, I should say, into a winning position. But the matchup may not be as fair in this first matches. Might be first thought, actually, because Will does have 2 disenchants main, does have plenty of counter magic, seeing 2 counter spells and a mana leak in hand already, and does have 2 Aura of Silence in the side, so definitely has the tools to keep Chris off of what is a very snowbally deck. And it looks like Chris is actually going to mulligan here too. I'm not sure who's going first. I'd have to think Will is keeping a hand of 7. And yeah, Chris's deck, obviously we saw it in a few rounds ago, definitely has an inevitability to it. So as long as Will can keep him off of that, keep those Enchantress effects to a minimum, I think he will have a chance to eventually close out the game with a large enough decree. Not sure what's being written on the scrap of paper there. Maybe just the amount of mulligans. Never great to see your opponent mulligan to oblivion, but when you're in the semifinals, you don't exactly hate to see it either, I guess. All right, looks like, oh, yep, okay, we're going to be putting 2 back, and Chris is going to be starting on 5, and is going first, which is going to be very relevant to get ahead of that counter magic as fast as possible. I believe both of his Enchantress effects do cost 2 each. And ramping already. Take a look at the land. I believe that's one of the alter promo proxy lands that we do at the beginning of every tournament. One of our regulars makes proxies. Oh, actually, that might be an alter, because usually our proxies have dogs, and that doesn't look like it's got a dog in it. All right, Will starting a little slow. Obviously doesn't have a 1-man counter in hand, no daze. Ooh, and just like I said, there's that Enchantress ability coming down for Chris, very clutch. Doesn't actually have a second land right now, but Will does, and now has both mana leak and counterspell. And actually, Chris just passed him there. Will more than content to continue to play out his lands. Second land coming down for Chris, just in the nick of time. That ramping actually being super relevant in turn 1, just to be able to play out his Enchantress. And no, these actually might be lands I've never seen, but they must be altered or proxied or something. Definitely not something I'm familiar with. So, Chris, I know you like to watch these videos. Comment below what exactly these forests are. And this, yeah, that is a second Enchantress, but that is going to get counterspelled. Can't tap the mana quick enough. Will just going to play out another blue, pass the turn. Does still have the mana leak, does still have the counterspell. Interesting that the mana leak wasn't fired off first, I guess. I'm sure there's reasoning behind that, but I figure you would want the more permissions based one to go first, because the more mana that Chris draws, the worse the mana leak is. Allowing the Miri's Guile to land, choosing to not mana leak it. Sarah's Sanctum coming down, and that is tapping for 2, I believe, right now. Okay, another Enchantress, also resolving. Interesting. No, we are gonna counterspell that one. Okay. And I believe Chris is just gonna pass the turn. Alright, on to Will's turn. One Enchantress got through. It's already proven to be difficult. Has countered 2 other ones. Can't really effectively deal with the Argothian Enchantress. It does have Shroud. That is a Wrath of God. Do you Wrath and not have mana up for a counterspell? That does seem risky. And despite Chris mulling to 5, I believe he has the card advantage right now, too. Alright, we're going to fetch here. Go grab a Plains. I know that's the European art Plains. It's not APAC, it's whatever the European version is. That must be what the forests are as well. That promo art. Must be for different European countries. I imagine the Plains is for... Oh, okay, we got a... Same going down. That is going to resolve. Very interesting that that was encountered. But Will does just have a mana leak, I believe, in hand right now. Coming back to bite him a little bit, not having that counterspell in hand instead of the mana leak that he could have cast in turn number 3, I believe. Having the explicit counterspell, usually better, but I understand wanting to not always have to keep 2 blue up. It is pretty obvious if you do that what you have. And Sarah's Sanctum making all the mana in the world. Draw another card. I believe we have 2 mana floating. Yeah, just 2 mana floating. Okay, that is going to get countered. And an elephant grass coming down.
Trigger, and then with that trigger on the stack, I'm going to use this.
Elephant grass not going to be super relevant here, but it does draw another card.
Okay, go ahead.
I can't imagine that upkeep cost is going to be getting paid. Especially with Will having exactly 0 creatures on the board. And probably won't until he's ready to start swinging in for lethal. Okay, here we go. Here's an answer to all of those 1 drops, or potentially 2. I have to think that getting the Mirror's Guile and the ramp off the board might be pretty good, but being able to take care of the GW Enchantress is not a bad deal either. And the Sarah Sanctum, or the whatever the green-white enchantment one is, where it gives all your other enchantments Shroud. And you can sack it to go find whatever enchantment you want, usually finding you the win con. I didn't really mention it in the deck tech because, to be honest, it's not always super relevant, but Chris can win in a few different ways. He does have a 1-of Decree of Justice for when he's making the Buku mana, which he's getting very close to. That Sarah Sanctum is tapping for 1, 2, 3, 4 right now.
I have 1 white floating. I'm going to play Parallax Wave.
Does have a Parallax Wave. Also not super relevant right now. All these answers to creature decks. And nothing getting countered by Will. And we're just gonna pass. Alright, getting some dice out, gonna tick up on the bomb. Definitely looking at 2 to be the target right now. Getting both Enchantress seems very good, but you do have to give him a whole other turn of drawing 2 times every time he plays an enchantment, so that is a little rough. Chris is trying to decide, I guess, if he's going to be paying for the elephant grass. It does generate a mana.
Resolve this before this. Okay.
Stacking the trigger, so he looks at Mirror's Guile before. Okay, is going to pay for the elephant grass. Very interesting. Maybe valuing the extra mana right now.
Play land for the turn. Spark this.
For at least 1 more turn.
Seal of Cleansing.
Alright, Seal of Cleansing coming down. That's going to be a problem.
I'm going to...
Now Will can just crack it in response to at least hit the elephant grass and the land ramp. And the Mirror's Guile, actually. Alright, we are fetching in response to the cast, I believe. A lot of triggers happening. Maybe choosing to do that so his top cards were not that great with Mirror's Guile. Alright, we got an Opalescence coming down. This is the other win con for Chris. I should say the third win con is just your opponent conceding. And from what I have seen and experienced, that's usually the most prominent one.
Draw trigger 2. And then this resolves.
Alright, Seal of Cleansing hits the field.
Dream play right now.
All of that happened on that cast trigger, mind you.
Rotating my land. I have 1 white floating.
Alright, tap in the Sanctum
5. So this is 5 mana.
for 5? Yeah.
I'm gonna play
Gonna cast the Opalescence.
leaving 1
2 floating still.
green.
1 green, 1 white. 2 draw triggers. There's a land, another one. We are gonna mana leak that. That is a very good mana leak. Taking out one of the win cons.
And then I'm gonna play Sterling Grove and then draw 2.
Alright, and a Grove coming down. Oh, a Disenchant. Interesting hitting the
Alright, so this is in
Parallax Wave before
killed the powder king.
that. Alright, yep. Crack the keg in response.
Yeah, that's artifacts and creatures. Yep.
Lose the Miri's Guile. Lose the Elephant Grass.
Yeah, powder king's not good against me.
No? Does it not hit enchantments? I thought it did.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Interesting. Okay.
Right now I have 7.
Alright, Wrath of God. Get those Enchantress effects off the board. At this point, though, it might be a little too late. He's got a tutor. He's got all the mana in the world. And it looks like he just drew a Replenish. Which is probably going on top. So unless Will's got a counterspell in hand, that Replenish is going to be a bit backbreaking. And that may just be the end of this game.
Fetch.
Okay, gonna fetch.
You have 2 cards?
Notably, Will has not taken any damage this turn, or this game yet. Still at a full 20. Granted, Chris is also just at 17. And we are on turn 10, 12. Both of these decks do not do much until they start winning. Okay, let's see that Replenish. Yep. All those things you countered, they're coming back unless you got an answer. Nope, that is going to be the end of game number 1. Okay, so like I said, the most common win con for Enchantress is your opponent conceding, which I totally understand. Will seeing the writing on the wall, as it were, not having a way to deal with the massive snowball that had become Chris's board state at that point, especially with that Replenish hitting. He's about to draw every card. So sideboarding has happened. I have to imagine Will has brought in the Aura of Silences and now knows to really keep up that mana around the 2-drop slot for Enchantress. Alright. Will's got the Fairy Conclave. Chris has got the same turn 1 ramp he did last game. Will's just going to pass with 2 blue up. No big deal. And I think we're going to be seeing a counterspell check here. I know that Chris does have an Enchantress in hand. Playing that out might be a little risky, so... Ooh, Miri's Guile. That is definitely a good counterspell check. That is a very good card. One that Chris has argued before is definitely on par, if not better, in this deck than Sylvan Library. And another good counterspell check, the Seal of Cleansing. Knowing that that Aura of Silence is probably coming in, getting a way to remove that early on is definitely going to be essential to stay in the game. And Will's just going to play that 3rd land and pass, giving Chris time to Miri's Guile. Oop, little card flicking accident there. Alright, 3 mana up, spending 2 of it. Let's do another counterspell check. I feel like this... Yep, that has to get counterspelled for sure. Alright, land coming down. How about a second one? Oof. Will, hand on head. Can't believe it. Thought he had it up. Alright, How about the most expensive edict effect ever? Wrath of God.
How many cards?
Does take some damage from casting that. Both players using paper, but hopefully the dice will get upgraded or updated as well.
Go ahead.
All right. Land go, says Chris. And are we going to get a land go, says Will? Nope, looks like we are going to animate the Fairy Conclave.
That's
Swing in for 2.
17. I'm gonna go to 16 actually. I'm gonna fetch.
And a fetch here as well from Chris. Probably just grab another forest at this point, I'd imagine. Or maybe just a white source that isn't going to be painful. Nope, we're going forest. Okay.
4 cards, huh?
I believe Will is at 17, maybe 18. He has had to activate those pain lands a little bit. Ooh, that is Sabo's Web. Is that coming from the sideboard, I wonder? I also see a Decree of Justice, but it's a little early for that. Okay, land coming down.
I'm gonna play Sabo's.
Oh, and he did pick the Sabo's Web. Draw a card off of it. I guess it did resolve. Yeah, that Fairy Conclave is not untapping anymore. And how about an Enchantress Presence? That one is going to get mana leaked. Will smartly holding up the mana, waiting for something worth countering. Well, that Sabo's Web actually is not worth countering. It is a cantrip. It does draw a card. That Fairy's Enclave or Conclave should not be untapped. Yep. There you go. Chris catching that. That Dust Bowl also is going to be pretty useless. Okay, yeah, I think Sabo's Web actually against Standstill makes a ton of sense with the 4 factories, the Dust Bowls, the Fairy Conclaves. I think there's a few others that it does hit. Maybe even a cycling land or 2. Could be very relevant. Alright, 3 for Enchantress Presence. Does have enough mana to pay for a mana leak, so this needs to be a counter spell. Okay, we're gonna Impulse here. Ooh, did find a counter spell. Also found Disenchant. What does he have in hand? Sleight of hand and something else. Okay, we'll be taking 2 off of that to counterspell.
And you have 2 cards.
Drops to 16.
Okay.
And that Dust Bowl joins the pile. That is an Aura of Silence, but it's a little late. Seal of Cleansing already down. Already able to take care of it as soon as it's cast, but I guess might as well. Worst case, you do take care of potentially 2 enchantments. Or hit the Sabo's Web. That's actually probably what the target's going to be. I feel like Chris would have to crack it here, but maybe just has enough mana he can fight through the aura. It is late enough in the game where it may not make as much of a difference. Ooh, especially if you find a Sarah's Sanctum, which he just did. That will be tapping for 3 when it comes down.
Cards, huh?
Not sure what else. There was a Decree of Justice, but not sure what the third card could be. I can't imagine he's considering the Decree right now. Maybe after the Seraph Sanctum would be enough mana to make it worthwhile. Oh, no, actually, so with the Dust Bowl potentially getting untapped after Sabo's Web hits the dust, that would be a very lucrative target, I guess. So that does make sense. Okay, we got some more ramp coming down. It does cost 2 more. Yep, there you go. And Chris thinking if he wants to pass here. Okay, on end step, hit the Tazawa's Web, get to untap your lands. Tormod's Crypt definitely shuts off a replenish. Replenish can be just not only backbreaking from the game state. Oh, just gonna crack it now. Interesting. Not even gonna wait to see a replenish. Yep, I'm gonna swing in for 2. But anyways, seeing replenish after you've spent all your resources removing their field, countering their spells, can just be morally backbreaking as well. Alright, we got a Miri's Guile. There's a Sanctum, there's a Brushland, and I guess must have drawn the... Yeah, okay. So we're looking basically to get a big Decree of Justice on Will's end step and try and close out the game that way. Alright, we're gonna slide a hand here. Oh wait, or is this a... No, this is a, not sleight of hand. Jesus, I'm blanking on the card name, but you guys know what it is. Draw 5, have your opponent put them into 2 different piles. Fact or fiction. That's what it is. And Chris here. A couple of good cards, actually. A Disenchant, or a Seal of Cleansing. A Counterspell, a couple of lands, and I think that's an annul, actually. So an annul and a Seal of Cleansing, both good, and then a Counterspell and 2 lands. I feel like interesting. Okay. Not opting for the 2 answers to enchantments, just going for the 1. Plays out a land. And on your end step, make 4 mana. Decree for a whole bunch. Notably, cannot counter the Decree because it is a cycling ability, which is an activated ability. Unless you had a Stifle. Which there's no reason why you would have sideboarded that in. We're making a ton of soldiers. How many exactly? I'm not quite sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 soldiers. Okay. Well, that is definitely way to end the game.
Yeah, because this was 4, and I had 1.
It is still... Oh, it is a 2-turn clock, actually, yeah. One of those turns is going to be happening now. Miri's Guile coming down. That is a replenish, but there's no targets for it, so I can't imagine that's going to be an early pick. Maybe just to get it to hand. Nope, we're going Brushland. Swinging for 8. Drop down to 7. and go. And I don't think Will has a Wrath of God in hand right now. It's gonna need something.
Okay. Can you get
Dropping down to 6.
Okay, that's good.
Maybe his own decree of justice to survive. Would not be nearly enough, but could buy him a little bit of turn. That is a Wrath of God. Does actually have the Wrath of God. Oh man, that is lucky. And is just gonna pass. All right, and now we're back to neither player having a clock or an end game. That is an opalescence.
Okay, I know you have the counter.
All right, Enchantress coming down. Very much a counterable target. Will he bait the counter spell? There's also a mana leak in hand too, though, which I don't think Chris knows.
Okay.
Interesting, letting it hit and opting to just kill the Sanctum.
Sure.
All right, Humility coming down. All creatures lose all abilities. That is a very good answer. That Enchantress no longer having enchantment abilities. But obviously that Seal of Cleansing is right there. And maybe Will forgetting about it or just wanting to get that seal off the board. All right, gonna use the seal. Opalescence.
I'm gonna have green floating. And I'm taking 2 damage. Yeah, and I'm drawing a card. So I'm gonna have 1 green.
Gonna take 2, I think, off of that. Yep.
Sorry.
Drops down to 15.
Damage down to 12. Sorry, my bad.
12.
Yep. And then you're gonna counter it.
All right, that will get countered.
Draw.
Definitely worth countering, but
Finish.
we know the replenish is still on top. That will get mana leaked. Very, very backbreaking. Good on Will. Had both counter spells. Still doesn't have a clock right now though. Still down on board and now has no cards in hand. Does have a Fairy Conclave, but that is a 6-turn clock. The chances are 6 turns may be too much. Also is only at 5. Those pain lands starting to add up a lot too. All right, gonna make a fairy, swinging for 2. Drop you to 9. And a disenchant on the Miri's Guile. Makes sense. It's not exactly card advantage, but it is card selection, which can be very beneficial with the amount of fetch lands and shuffle effects with tutors that Chris is running.
Play Mary's Guile, draw.
Unless you just draw another Miri's Guile. Well, or how about one more Miri's Guile?
Draw.
And draw a card off of that. Is that another replenish? It might be.
Play lands.
Oh, it's a plains. Okay.
Damage.
Tap into
Parallax Wave, draw.
plus mana off of the forest for a Parallax Wave,
Take a damage.
which will take care of that Fairy Conclave nicely. That's an exploration.
I'm gonna go 7.
And this is where the deck really just starts to snowball. All the mana in the world, as long as you're able to keep hitting enchantments, you can keep playing them out. And Chris is just going to pass.
This is gonna be a good one.
And unfortunately, Will just drew a land. And with Miri's Guile, this might
Okay,
be the end.
no matter what.
Replenish would do it here. tutor for a replenish or for a opalescence. I don't know if there's more than one actually though in Chris's deck. I don't think there is. All right, let's see what happens.
Play Enchantress.
Another Enchantress ability.
Draw a card.
Draw one.
What they used to call this deck, solitaire?
Use some of that floating mana. He does have a decree, I think. No, what's that in hand? Is that his own humility? Not sure.
I'm gonna leave the
Cards are flicking a little too fast.
cast
All right, 2.
cleansing.
Oh, for a seal of cleansing. Okay. Draw 2. I think that's a Sterling Grove. Does have the mana to cast it? No, needs a white source, I believe. Does have exploration. I don't think he's played a second land for turn.
Karmic Justice.
What is this doing?
You destroy one of my non-creature permanents, I get to destroy one of your permanents. 2 draws.
All right, draw true off of that trigger. Hit a forest.
Play lands.
And it's just gonna pass, I think. Even if he wants to play anything else. Nope, just gonna pass. And this looking pretty hopeless from Will's side at this point. This is what the Enchantress deck does. It does a lot of things on its own. Definitely playing solitaire. Until eventually it hits its win con. Sarah Sanctum is pretty good. Doesn't really need the mana right now though. Unless, well, there is that Sterling Grove.
Number 1.
Okay. Land coming down.
Fetch.
Crack it. Go to 6. Probably finding a white source at this point. Needing to not take so much damage off of the brush lands. Giving a quick look through his deck just to see what's left in there. Pile is getting kind of small. Downside of drawing so many cards.
Gonna have a green floating.
Tap into, taking
I'm gonna play.
all but one of it.
Play Sterling.
All right, Sterling Grove coming down. Draw 2. Nope, I think, yep. Will is just going to pack it up there. Getting the concede win for the second game in a row. Chris takes it down. He'll be headed to the finals, which will be coming out soon, so keep an eye out for that. If you guys have liked, subscribed, and done everything that you could possibly do to support the channel, and you want to do more, there is a Patreon link down below. That money goes towards gear upgrades, travel expenses, that sort of thing for the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.